Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, Michael. How are you?
Doing great. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. Really excited about this discussion today. Um, I know folks are still joining in, so we'll give about 10 seconds because that's the extent of our generosity here, and we want to start on time. Welcome everyone to a very special discussion with Michael, who heads up Voice of Customer program at Figma. Michael has been a close partner to Interpret for quite a while, and I've learned a lot just working with him, discussing all the way from high-level strategy and the impact of Voice of Customer to the nitty-gritty of implementations and rolling out a specific team. So I'm super excited about this discussion. I think the topic of we'll spend a couple of minutes just doing quick introductions here, but we will spend most of the time discussing essentially the journey of like how Figma came to realize that it needed a VOC program, how the rollout was, the challenges and obstacles along the way, and the impact it's seen, and how it's evolving its strategy as the business scales to make sure the Voice of Customer program is able to scale up efficiently as well. So super excited to get started. Michael, maybe do a quick introduction about yourself, and then we can jump right in.
Yeah. Thanks, Arun and team. Trying to make me blush before we start chatting, but thanks for all the kind words. It really has been a great experience working with you, and I think this is just a great moment to reflect on kind of how far we've come and how much more work we have to do. But it's a great moment to just kind of think about the Voice of Customer community that we're building, and it's like we've met so many people just through our partnership. I'm just excited to be here and reconnect and chat. So yeah, I'm Michael. I lead Voice of Customer at Figma. We are on the research team. So we roll up into the product org, which is a little unique. And prior to this, I was at Asana for about 7 years. I led the business strategy team there and also kind of built and scaled out VOC at Asana. For me, I think this is just a passion of mine. I'm just a strong believer in the best products and the best companies to work for are genuinely and authentically customer-centric. And I've somehow stumbled into a job where I get to kind of work on that every day and help organizations really manifest that through processes and tools and kind of these types of programs. So excited to chat today.
Yeah, awesome. And I can say that authentic passion comes through in every single conversation we've had. Awesome. So let's get started. I think the first thing, Michael, just to maybe a quick history lesson to see like how did Figma come to a realization that it needed to like invest more into customer feedback and like Voice of Customer program? Like, could you just walk us through that?
Yeah. It was actually funny. I met with the Figma team when I was still at Asana, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. And they were feeling the same types of challenges that I think a lot of organizations face when they're kind of scaling and growing, and like, how do you manage some of these challenges with customer feedback? And so specifically, I think there were kind of like 4 key themes that they were experiencing. The first one's just like, I don't know where to find things, right? So salespeople don't know which channel to like log feedback, what's tool to put it in. They don't know where it goes or like how it gets acted on. New product builders come in and they're like, okay, where's all the feedback? What surveys do we have? What data do we have? And it's just so much time and energy to go find this like gold mine of data. And that just becomes a challenge. The other one is just like, there's no single source of truth, right? And I think a lot of teams talk about this, but like they talk about it in this like aspirational way, like, oh, someday we'll get there. But the reality is like when you scale and grow with people and tools, all of your insights and feedback like live in different places. And so it becomes really hard to mobilize on any of it, right? It's like you get these little snippets here and there and you kind of lose context, which is kind of the next theme, which is like context is super important when it comes to customer feedback because like not every piece of feedback is the same, not every customer is the same, and understanding where that feedback comes from, deals, like where they are in the deal cycle, what size of customer, what tier they're on, what's their persona, like all of those things are really important parts of really good feedback. And so just like as you grow and scale, that becomes much harder. And then there was a really interesting thing here, like closing the loop. So I think a lot of times VOC programs talk about like closing the loop with customers. And I think here, when I joined, I noticed that we weren't closing the loop with salespeople. So like salespeople would confess to me and they'd say, yeah, Michael, I don't log feedback anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, I don't know where it goes. I just stopped doing it. And then I would ask them like, well, do you think the product team is focused on the right stuff? And they're like, 100%. I'm like, wait, so they're listening to your feedback. They just didn't let you know that they were listening to your feedback. So it's this really like interesting thing there. But Varun, I would say that these are like pretty common things. You must hear these a lot too when you talk to us. Yeah. So I think the unique thing about Figma was really more around just like the realization of how important customer feedback was to their success and what got them to where they were, and how important it is to be for where they want to go and be successful. Right. So Dylan, like naturally our CEO and founder, is like a researcher and designer by heart. And he authentically like wants to sit down, talk to customers. He's on Twitter, like engaging with customers. And so we kind of set that culture from the beginning. But as we continue to grow and scale, like no single person could have that point of view anymore, right? Like no single person could like have a full picture of all of the customer needs and customer feedback. And then there was this catalyzing moment behind like the pandemic and trying to launch a new product that I think was this like tipping point of like, okay, we know managing feedback and listening to customers is critical to how we're going to be successful. And there was like champions on both the business and product team to say like, we need to invest in this. And fortunately they said that because now I have a job here. So I think that's kind of the key thing, is like really understanding that cross-functional kind of community of these grassroots movement of people that want to build these VOC programs, but really having the product leadership side to advocate for it. I think I talked to a lot of folks, and they want to grow these programs on the support side or success side. But without that kind of partnership and relationship on the product side, I think it becomes really hard to just like really get the momentum going.
Yeah. Awesome. But thank you for sharing that. I think what's really stands out to me is like the appreciation that we've grown, and like customer feedback and learning from that and acting upon it has played a massive role, and not being satisfied with how it is and still making it a big enough priority to up level it like even further to get ready for the next stage of growth of the business. I think that is rare, unfortunately, and I guess the results speak for themselves, right? Because like Figma is obviously arguably the defining software company of our times. So I think that really stands out, as like not being satisfied is already a good enough process and system, but appreciating that this is a incredible input and we need to make it even 10 times better. So I think that's awesome. And then so that's very clear on that. And then so how did you enter the picture? And then walk us through what was the rollout strategy of like uplifting this like semi-established VOC program and taking it to the next level. Like walk us through like the rollout journey and how that was like.
Yeah, of course. I think the exciting thing about joining Figma and like focusing on this problem was like a lot of the cultural stuff was already there. So like my job was much easier in the sense that like I'm trying to scale and build a program around like already existing great behaviors and values. And so I think there's kind of like, I took an outside in and inside out approach. First with the outside in, like this is kind of your core VOC loop, right? Like how do you put customers at the center? How do you set up mechanisms to listen, understand what their needs are, kind of take action, prioritize, build features, build solutions, and then close the loop so that they feel heard, they feel valued. And then you get all the amazing like unit economic benefits of like longer retention, higher upsell, all of that good stuff, right? And I think this is pretty core, but I think the key thing that I had to like think about was also like, what's the inside out, or what's the scaling strategy for this at Figma? And really, like VOC here is really about how do we scale the way customer feedback is integrated into the way we build product. And so the way I describe our VOC program to folks here is like, it's kind of like a three-tiered stack or three kind of core capabilities of the program. The top one is really around alignment. So this was something that was really important when I was at Asana. Like this was kind of like the bread and butter of VOC was on. It was like twice a year, we do a stack ranking process. The business comes together with like, here are all of our needs. Here are kind of the top priorities. And then we talk to product, we negotiate and we say, okay, let's have a moment of alignment before we go into road mapping of like, These are the top things that we should focus on, right? And then the second tier is this awareness piece. So like, how do we build these closed loop feedback processes where we're able to kind of route and triage feedback real time between customer facing teams and product builders? And then the last part of the program is around analysis. So how do we take all of our feedback channels and aggregate it into a place that's accessible for analysis, and just deepening the understanding and deepening the like quantification of what's important, and really empowering product builders and insight consumers to be able to use all of this rich data to inform decisions and actions. Yeah, so that's kind of the two mental models that I was like kind of keep holding in my space to think about what's the, like what's the customer facing strategy for VOC, and then what's our strategy and how we're going to scale it up, and like what are the capabilities the organization needs.
Awesome. And then was there any like stumbling blocks that came along the way, or anything that you had to like bring specific teams to be like beta partners, or like how was that, or any timelines that you were focused on to measure the improvements?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is like it's really hard to focus because there's so many different things you can do, right? Like even across alignment, awareness, analysis, there's like a million projects or ideas that we can go pursue. And so I think one of the big challenges was like understanding where to start, and then understanding like how to build on top of that. And so I can kind of go into a little bit more of like the sequencing of it and where I started, and kind of just like bring us up to speed to where we are today. But yeah, I think there's kind of like, for me, the first thing I started with was awareness. And this was a surprise to the team. They were like, why are you focusing on that? Like there's all these bigger fish to fry. Like we need a platform, we need NLP, we need this. And so for me, it was really important to kind of strengthen this feedback loop between customer facing teams and product builders, because that is culturally like something that was really strong here. And as we were growing from like 300, 400, 500, 600 employees, I think if we didn't solve for that, we would kind of erode that trust and that connection and fall into this like us versus them mindset that I think you see at a lot of big organizations, right? So at Figma, we use Asana, the product team uses it. So it was really leaning into that and just like standardizing this core loop process of like, here's the single place you submit feedback. It goes in Asana form, super simple. It's just like bug tracking. You're like, here's the user need, here's the user email, and like, here's the product area, right? Then we have automation set up to route that to the right product team. So automatically it goes to, whether it's the FigJam team or the editor team, it goes to them. And then we enrich that feedback as well using Zapier and Salesforce. So now when Interpret gives us feedback around FigJam, I say, hey, Varun wants this feature. It automatically goes in and says, oh, Interpret is, a enterprise customer. They're in this industry, this tier. And so the product manager automatically gets this like contextual feedback. And then the conversation happens all in one place at Asana. And then that gets, basically just put into a product backlog. And then the product team will triage it, meaning they'll close the loop by saying, oh, we're already working on this. Or they'll say, we're working on this in the next 6 months. Or Michael, we're not working on that at all. But at least I know, right? I can inform and tell the customer like, hey, we're actually working on that, or we're not. So that really strengthened. And then the last piece is just like storing all of this in one place, right? So now it goes into Snowflake, into Interpret. And now we have all this like rich labeling and capabilities to analyze all of this data that just used to live in Slack or just used to live in DMs.
Right. Yeah. I think what really stands out to me in this, Michael, is I think it's something that maybe not intuitive is, when you're starting like a VOC program, you may want to focus on like, hey, let's just what are people saying on Zendesk, like basically just like let's listen to support tickets and see like what are report there. But I think what you've done is like you've expanded the scope of like both the customer facing and the internal facing scope. So you're looking at like, hey, like feedback is feedback, like it is coming from like Zendesk or Discourse or Discord or like any other place that our customers exist and talk about our products. But also internally, I think it stands out that you invested so heavily in the internal feedback loop as well between your the product and the go-to-market and operations team, to making sure that feedback is also given its due respect basically as well. So I think like that really stands out there.
Yeah. I mean, you and I both come from customer success backgrounds. So we know that like I think the best CSMs are intrinsically motivated to advocate for their customer.
Right.
And I think if you don't provide an avenue to do that, and you don't provide a way for people to get benefit and like build connection around that, then it's a huge missed opportunity. And so I think one of the benefits of like having this process is, yeah, the data and like the automation is nice, but really it builds connection, like between CSMs and product people, between like a salesperson and a designer. And I think that's super important in this like hybrid remote world as well.
Yeah. Especially when the company is scaling as fast as like Figma is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you talk maybe about like the other components a little besides awareness?
Yeah. So the next thing I did once I felt confident, like, well, this is always a work in progress, but that the kind of awareness piece was built, is really around alignment. So as I mentioned, like at Asana, this was kind of the P0 activity that VOC needed to do, which was like, okay, what are all the different opinions? What does everyone think? How does that roll into a single list that can help inform product planning and product road mapping? So at Figma, there's a product philosophy that like all strategy starts with insights. And so every kind of planning process, there's just like, here are all the insights from VOC, here are the insights from the research team, here's the insights from the market analysis. And that is the grounding in which leadership and product teams start thinking about plans. And so we use RevMap for this, but it's just like a way to collect everyone's opinions and let their opinions feel heard, that they can advocate for, the customers that they're working with on a day-to-day basis. And I think there's something beautiful about letting people feel like they could really vote, because then, there's the salespeople that are too busy. They're not going to submit every little piece of feedback.
Yeah.
But when you give them a chance to vote and explain why they're voting for the things there's really rich insights into kind of their point of view and their context of the customer that allows this like kind of connection between the product team and the business team to like really understand.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I like that you're multi-threaded, even the internal loop of like, okay, you can submit a request, you heard, but also if you don't want to do that and you just want to vote and have a point of view of what the company should build next, like you can also do that. So that's awesome. So we talked about awareness, talked about alignment, and then what about like on the analysis front?
Yeah, I think this is probably why everyone's here. But on the, like, I'll be honest with you, like when I started, this was not top of mind for me. Like I didn't think it was possible. Yeah. I'll just be honest with you. I didn't think it was possible. I was like, it's so much work. It's so hard to get the resourcing and like engineering resources and like the manual labeling. Like I just don't think like it's worth it. But after the pilot and like seeing how Interpret can aggregate our feedback, automatically label it, it just unlocked all of these use cases that some were like we wanted, but some like we're surprised by across the entire product building process. So, at Figma, the thing I'm realizing too is like the way we build product here is like everything's work in progress. There's no like, it goes from this phase to this phase to this phase, and it's like perfect, like theoretical product development process. It's really like every team is constantly iterating, evolving, and like updating their points of view. And so by having a single source of truth for our aggregated feedback, we'll be able to do things like, have much richer planning workshops, enabling teams to like really leverage feedback as evidence for why they're driving certain insights or why they're driving certain plans, right? Then there's also bottoms up like planning that it enables. So not just like company-wide OKRs, but, product pillar level people can say, hey, everyone, before we go into our offsite, here's all the Interpret dashboards for our product area. Make sure to like see what the top trends are, the top reason codes are, right? And then there's all these other like operational use cases that this unlocks besides analysis. Like now it's super easy for teams like PMMs to self-serve, like, oh, who's been asking for this? Oh, we should invite them to the beta. Oh, we should feature them in the config launch coming up soon, right? So like, I remember this used to be such a hard thing to do at Asana. It was like, how do we find these people? Are they the right launch partners? But they haven't used it yet. They haven't had access yet. And so just like unlocking some of these use cases through having this platform has been pretty amazing.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. I think, and then just like pulling the data out and making like things that seemed hard now are easy.
Yeah, great to hear that. One thing that's like I've deeply appreciated is like there's the conventional mindset that like, oh, customer feedback is important when you're planning, and I think that is like a very intuitive, but also like a very like high level view of like the only use case for customer feedback. I think what's really special about Figma is like how you've leveraged like just customer feedback and insights basically throughout every step of the product building lifecycle. So it's like not only from just planning workshops, but embedding into the planning pre-reads. And then when you're okay, this is when you've decided what to build, and then okay, you're writing PRDs, then you want to add context into PRDs and say, hey, this is why you're building this, as you're doing the handoff to the team. And then, throughout the building process, like finding people who've given this feedback in the past to potentially recruit them as beta users. And then once you've built it, then closing the loop with customers, anyone who had given feedback on this topic in any channel in the past 6 months. I really think that's just how you should think about like customer feedback as a deeply integrated like module in the entire journey of like building like products and improving them, right? And then the V1.1 comes along and your feedback for that, and you go through the same cycle again. So I think that really like stands out to me as like something that's like really special about truly deeply leveraging like customer feedback in the entire product building lifecycle.
Yeah, 100%.
Did that happen like organically, or was it like a point of view? Like I'm just curious, like was it organically happen, or like was there a point of view like, hey, we want to use it in these like points in the product building journey?
Yeah, I think there's intentions and people want to do that. I think like the best salespeople and best CSMs want to give feedback. They want to influence the product roadmap. I think the best product marketers want to engage with users and like include them along the way. I think the best product managers want to sit in on customer calls and they want to like see people using the product in real time. The biggest challenge is as you grow, you have to make trade-offs with time. Those things are just like so hard and so easy to deprioritize, right? Like how many CEOs you hear say like, oh, we used to read support tickets once a week. Like that's like part of every, like all these rituals, but then you get to 100 people, 200 people, and you're like, oh yeah, we can't do that anymore. And so I think for me, it's just leaning into those desired behaviors and just like making it easier for them. Like, let's just reduce the friction it takes to do that, and I think that's been the cool thing about my role is just kind of like playing this behind the scenes, like concierge of like, oh, you want to do that? Let me help you do that. Or let me just start that for you and make it easier. And so I think that's kind of the key learnings here is like identifying those behaviors that you're seeing, because people naturally like really good product builders are doing it. And it's like, how do you find it? How do you enable them to do it easier and faster and like tell their friends about it? And I think just like leaning into that to really tailor your VOC program to the product building culture that you have. I think that was like a really big lesson for me. Having a chance to kind of work on VOC here.
Awesome. Changing gears a little bit, like would love to know, like, since, we've been working on this problem statement at Figma, for quite some time now, what has changed? Like, what's been the impact of this? Like, how do you like reflect on the before and the after?
Yeah, I remember last time we talked, we were like, oh, what's the ROI metric and what's the North Star? And it's like, I used to laugh because it's such a hard thing to quantify. So I've kind of stopped and I've just tried to like lean on anecdotes and stories that make me feel good that we're making progress. And so I think there's some like really obvious ones like, oh, VOC is used in planning. It's corroborating top-down and bottoms-up planning. Like kind of like check that box. It's serving a pretty core need. And that makes me feel good. That makes me feel like we're democratizing the feedback. We're making it accessible. And we're letting kind of like everyone understand that they now have evidence and credibility to their strategies, to their roadmaps. And it's not just like, well, I said so, or I think this, right? It's like people are actually able to share their product intuition. And it's not just like some genius in a room saying like, this is what customers want. So I think that's one that's like pretty obvious, but there's some smaller kind of like surprising things that I think are really exciting. Like for example, there used to be teams that always struggled with like getting the right amount of feedback and like using it to actually inform product decisions and roadmaps. Like, for example, I used to lead business strategy in the partnerships team. Like you knew there was feedback around like integration partners or from developers, but like it was always hard to find, it was hard to act on. But now we actually have like a really strong partnership with our BD and partnerships team where they have their own workflow to collect feedback for specific integration partners. They have a voting process now that says like, here are the top requests, and we should like inform their roadmaps. So that's super cool. Like just be able to just like provide teams that historically I wasn't able to provide them with any value for VOC. Now they're like really close partners. The other thing is just like having this like much deeper connection between kind of product marketers and customers. Like I mentioned this in the past, but like coming up with like, who should we showcase in a customer story used to be really hard. It used to be like, oh, I know this person who knows this person, and maybe I can get a meeting. Now it's like, who asked for this feedback? Oh, let's reach out to them. Let's set up a call.
Yeah.
Oh, let's include them in the beta. Oh, like we have in-depth, real understanding of how they use the product before the feature, after the feature. And now these like, you know, like these rich stories come to life where product marketers and product builders are connecting with real people that they're building for.
Yep. Yeah.
Which I think is amazing.
Yeah. I think the one that I like this one really because I think one of the like a basic understanding of customer feedback is like, hey, like it's complaints and you need to figure out a way to like fix complaints, or like then the next level are feature requests, and like figure out a way, okay, how we can like think about feature requests and prioritize the roadmap, and all of that is true. But then you have these like, it's such a valuable data set at the end of the day, right? That you can leverage it for, hey, like the product marketing team needs to figure out which are the best suited customers to recruit for a beta or highlight based on, and then obviously the people who've proactively given feedback over in the past are definitely the best. And so being able to think about that in that way, I think is also like a very interesting use case that stands out. Yeah. And then anything like any of the examples that stand out, or do you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of talked about this a lot, but like, why do people think of qualitative, like why don't they treat qualitative data as important as quantitative data? You know, I think that's been kind of like one of your key talking points for a while. And I think one example here that's like, even for me was very surprising was we were working on a big feature release. And there was a question of like, how do we package this? What's the right tier? Like, what's the right pricing and packaging for this new offering? And someone on the business strategy team reached out. They're like, Michael, can you pull who's asked for this, and like what plan they're on, and like what's their ARR and all of that. And I remember thinking like before, like, oh, that would have been really hard in the past. But I was like, yeah, we can do that. So I was like, let me just go and interpret, find that track keyword, export that, join it with Redshift data, and like get the revenue data and the usage data. And it like turned that around in a day. And I found out that actually helped them inform the pricing and packaging strategy. You know, like, so it's like to be able to like leverage qualitative feedback and do it in a day, when it wasn't like, oh, let me prioritize that. It was just like, yeah, let me put that together this afternoon and see what it could do. That's making me excited to realize like, you know, we are making it possible to use qualitative feedback in ways that I don't think organizations really considered in the past.
Yeah. I think that's such an incredible example that, you know, like if you ask people like, how do you inform pricing strategy, and like analyzing customer feedback would probably be very at the bottom. But
yeah,
like thinking of that as a data set and then enriching it with like who the feedback has been from across over time, like from Salesforce, and joining that, and then that becomes a very valuable input inform, okay, what's our pricing strategy for this new launch that we're doing. I think that's like such an incredible use case.
Yeah, we've talked about how like it's always been hard to tie it to revenue, right? But like this is like a direct tie of like these pricing decisions are gonna like fundamentally change the way you capture revenue with a new product or a new feature. So I think that was super cool.
Awesome. And then as you're thinking about so we have like a couple more questions, then we open up to the audience for Q&A. Like what's next for Figma's VOC? I think we've gone through like the V 1.0, and then when you joined, it's like the V2, much more suited for scaling up and like better design process for to capture input and internal and external feedback. Driving awareness, alignment, analysis. What's next? Like, how do you think about like up leveling it further?
Yeah, I think there's just like always work to do to make the process better and more scalable. So I think about how do we get I feel like we have product market fit now. Like product builders know about it. They want this data. Now they're starting to come to me like, hey, Michael, could we get more data? Could we get chorus calls in here? Can we get more Zendesk ticket types? Could we get, Reddit threads and stuff like that? And so like, I think once you kind of see the power of even just like small data sets you have, you want that full picture. You want that, well, where's everyone talking about us? Like I want all of that. And then there's teams that don't have that luxury of like, they work on product surface areas that don't get talked about a lot or don't have a lot of tickets. And so helping them find and create new listening channels or listening posts so that they can get this rich feedback and data, I think is important. And then also just like, as we move into AI, like having this foundational infrastructure now really puts us in a good position. Like, I'm so glad, you kept telling us like about Interpret. Cause I was like, if we didn't have this, I'd be feeling so stressed and behind about like this AI wave and like all these cool use cases you could do. But now I'm like super excited. We can actually experiment it with it now. Like I can export stuff from Interpret, feed it in and like leverage GPT and just like analyze it in ways that, I used to have to do manually. So I think that's something that keeps me going and gets me excited. And just like continue to build out this maturity model, like when we think about awareness, alignment, and analysis, like every organization is different. And how do we kind of build VOC programs that scale and become, like mission critical? I think product companies need to understand like this isn't that complicated. You just really need dedicated time and energy to like chip away at it. And it's going to be critical for how you build product.
Yeah, I think very well said. Yeah, I think I totally agree with that. I think especially in today's day and age when you can't no longer easily buy growth and spend throw money at marketing dollars to just like show top line growth. Like customer retention is paramount, and like being able to like leverage your customer feedback to confidently make the bets you have to on building the right things. I think if you're not doing that, like you're going to be facing a lot of trouble pretty soon.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, we're almost coming up 35 minutes. I want to leave some time for audience Q&A, so I will open it up. I have folks have asked a few questions on the chat, so I'll just read a few out. The first one is how do all of the VOC actions and rituals, how do they fit within the broader, larger planning process at Figma? Could you talk about that?
Yeah, I think anyone that's been involved in planning processes knows that planning process change every time you do planning. And so for us, it's really it's more of a philosophy. It's like all strategy starts with insights, and like you should defend your strategies and plans with the insights that are motivating those strategies and plans. And so it's actually really easy for VOC to like just snap into that. Concretely, basically, when we go into planning, there's a FigJam file, and whoever's driving that part of planning gets to kind of decide the workshop part of that. But there's always a section in there that's like, what are the insights motivating your strategy? And so I get to see people plop in, Interpret dashboards directly in there and just kind of like screenshot those and link to them. And so it's actually pretty effortless for people to kind of just tap into the VOC insights into those rituals and processes.
Awesome. Yeah. Great. Another question is from Jordan. It's like you mentioned your discourse forum was one of the many areas you gather feedback. Do you automate this feedback to be stored in Interpret?
Yeah, I don't do any labeling or like a triage on it. It just flows in there. It goes through your guys's taxonomy, and it's really funny because I think a year ago we were talking about this. Like there was all these people like, oh, we need a taxonomy. We need to build our own. We need to label it. We need to have a process. And I'm like, that's not scalable.
Yeah.
And so now that we've kind of removed that constraint, we can just go pull all of the feedback and just keep throwing it in there for you guys.
Yeah. We take it. Jordan, we can take care of this here for you. So the next question is from Sarah, which is, what worked and didn't work when you rolled out your VOC program with cross-functional teams so that they would get on board with the new process? That's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, the general answer is like anything that added friction didn't work. And I think there were people like, oh, we want to capture more data. And I'm like, asking salespeople to even one more field to add for context switching is kind of like could be a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Right. So I think like an example of that is like, oh, let's ask for ARR when we or deal size, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, that's one more field that a salesperson has to ask. And then it's like, what are they going to do with that? Is it accurate? Is it like is it actually helpful? And so that's kind of where we got the idea of like, instead of asking the salesperson to do it, why don't I just automate the enrichment and just like go look it up in Salesforce and add it to the ticket,
Yeah.
So learning what doesn't work actually is pretty helpful in understanding like where you can innovate and where you can kind of be creative as well.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think especially like, any post PMF decently fast scaling company, like anytime I hear like, oh, we need to collect more feedback, I'm like, no, you have plenty of feedback. Like just figure out a way to make sense of it, right? And don't let that data rot away as it is right now.
Yeah.
So I love that mindset of like just thinking about making it efficient, even for internal stakeholders, to not put extra work just for the sake of the process. So yeah, that's how it should be in my opinion as well. So yeah. Awesome. All right. Next question is from Padma, which is how do you keep PMs accountable, especially when they're looking for more quant data and avoiding getting these on the roadmap?
Yeah, this is actually a really good question. And it's probably the first question I ask when I talk to other VOC practitioners, which is like, how are PMs incentivized at your organization? And like, how are they accountable to, solving customer needs? I'd say the answer here at Figma is the accountability lever is cultural. It's through product philosophy. It's through behaviors and values that existing product managers exhibit. It's values that we look for when hiring product managers and designers. And so it's actually really easy for me. I don't have to really worry about the accountability piece because it's kind of built into the DNA of how we build product. And just simply put, it's like all insights, like all strategy starts with insights. And that could be quant data, that could be qual data. And I think elevating the access of qual data so that those folks can, defend their strategies, just like, quant teams do when they have really strong data science insights and stuff like that too.
Awesome. The next question is from ICEA, which is how do you handle the volume of feedback in the triage process?
Yeah, so the awareness, the Asana feedback process is pretty manageable volume. So I think we get like 150 to 200 like tickets a month. And the way we handle the volume of it is just like through the automatic routing, it just kind of gets dispersed to the right product team automatically. And so those product teams have their own rituals. Like some will do it async, some will do it like distributed across different, PMs and designers. Some will do it in their weekly stand-ups. And I don't prescribe how they should do it. I'm just like, hey, where's your mailbox? I'm going to deliver insights to you guys. You open up your mail whenever you want.
Yeah.
And I found that it actually works, not being super prescriptive about it, because there's value in those insights and there's value in that grooming and triage process, because when they get into plans, they already kind of have everything all like queued up and ready to go.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. And then this one question, this is, from an internal team member, which is, what is, okay, sorry. How do you encourage, like, what would you say to someone who wants to get started on voice of customer today, right? And they basically, they just have Zendesk and they have support agents who are just triaging feedback. And then they have like 3 other channels of feedback. They have Gong and surveys, but it's all sitting there. But the extent is like a monthly PDF. And what should they go and tell the company execs to build a case to like, hey, we should invest more into this?
Yeah, I would say go find the audience that those insights are intended for and validate whether it's working or not working and build that relationship, right? Like you're sitting on gold. You want to go find the person that's going to buy that gold and use it. And so I think the best kind of tipping points I've seen is when there is like, I hop on a call and there's the product lead or the PM responsible, and then there's like the CSM that's like spearheading VOC, right? I think there's that yin and yang relationship. And I think naturally you'll be able to decide, like, do we need the top 10 alignment piece? Like, is that the first thing we should do that we're missing? Or is it something else? Is it this continuous feedback loop, or which one of these pain points that, I mentioned in the past, like, should we start solving first and just like slowly build momentum? And then next thing you know, people are like, oh, this is awesome. We need more of it.
Yeah. I love that. I love the philosophy of like, talk to the right audience, validate, get small wins first, and then it has an incredible like downhill of the rolling stone effect, which it compounds over time. Which I think I've also seen that play out at multiple different companies. Awesome, Michael. Thank you so much for your time. This was as always, it's a joy talking to you anytime about like customer feedback and voice of customer programs. So appreciate your time and putting on this like wonderful FigJam file to make it even more like visually appealing while we're discussing this. Thank you for the folks who joined us today as well and engaged. I really appreciate this, and hope to see most of you, if not all of you, at our next quarterly event as well. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks.